It started with a sound that would haunt your nightmares. The slow, grinding groan of wood turning against wood, echoing beneath floors of polished marble. Above ground, the emperor's harem was a paradise of silk robes, golden koi ponds, and the sweet perfume of rose and myrrh. But that perfume was a lie, a heavy mask designed to cover the scent of something much darker, rotting beneath the foundation. Her name was Lady Anlian, once the jewel of the inner garden, whose laughter was called the music of the lilies. But now, strapped into a chair in the crushing dark, the only music she heard was the creak of a machine that would never, ever stop turning. They claimed the emperor sought peace through order, that he was a philosopher king who believed enlightenment required the total surrender of the flesh. But deep in a sealed stone chamber lit only by dying oil lamps, that order was revealed as a circle of absolute madness. The emperor named it the Chamber of Reflection, and his sycophants called it a miracle of discipline. But the women who were dragged down those hidden stairs never spoke again. The air down there was thick with burnt incense and old oil, a choking sweetness meant to enforce purity through pain, a smell that would outlast every scream that bounced off the cold stone walls. Lady Anlian's crime wasn't treason or adultery, it was silence. She had refused to sing at a banquet, and in a court obsessed with control, silence was an act of war. As the red-robed monks dragged her away, the palace musicians played louder to drown out her cries, signaling the beginning of a descent into a hell engineered to break the human soul. Dragged through corridors that appeared on no map, and Lian was thrown into a circular room that smelled of rusted iron and fear. At the center stood the device, a ring of wooden chairs carved with the exquisite beauty of a temple throne, yet designed with the cruelty of a slaughterhouse. This was the kneeling meditation. The victim was forced to kneel on a seat that tilted forward, locking the body in a stress position that strained the ligaments to the breaking point. But the true horror wasn't the position, it was the motion. Connected to a hidden mechanism, the chairs rotated slowly, endlessly, a constant nauseating sway that denied the body even a second of rest. The emperor believed that through this unending motion, the spirit would detach from the body, rebellion would dissolve, and only pure obedience would remain. Every hour, silent attendants sprinkled crushed jasmine on the floor, not to honor the women, but to mask the stench of sweat, urine, and terror. And Lian's wrists were bound, the wood dug into her knees, and the slow rotation began. A tender, rhythmic sway that felt like a cradle but acted like a rack. She tried to pray to the old gods, but as hours bled into days, her prayers turned into breathless moans, and finally into a silence far deeper than the one she was punished for. The emperor didn't just order this, he watched it. Hiding behind a mirrored partition, he observed his discarded lovers swaying in their mechanical penance, convincing himself he was hearing the sound of enlightenment. But what he was really hearing was the sound of his own guilt eating him alive. This wasn't just a torture device, it was a religious doctrine carved into gears and levers. The schematics were hidden in a holy text called the Manual of Enlightened Stillness, turning agony into engineering. The mechanics were deceptively elegant. The chair sat on a weighted pivot, driven by a water clock hidden beneath the floor. Drip, turn, drip, turn. Every drop of water released a fraction of pressure, rotating the chair by degrees too small to see but impossible to ignore. It was a torture of time, a weaponization of infinity where the muscles locked. Bones ground against bones and the mind shattered under the weight of repetition. The attendants, eunuchs with their tongues removed to ensure silence, whispered to the victims that their pain was an illusion. "The body is nothing," they chanted, "only motion remains." The emperor's reign was crumbling, armies failing, famine spreading. So he turned the harem into a mirror of the control he lost in the real world. If he couldn't rule the empire, he would rule the hearts and bodies of these women with absolute mechanical tyranny. He reframed cruelty as virtue, convincing the court that to suffer without rebellion was to transcend. But the human body has limits that philosophy cannot override. After 7 days of rotation, Lady Anlian's skin tore, her breath rattled, and the light left her eyes. The attendant stopped the machine only to adjust her broken posture before setting it spinning again. When they finally unstrapped Lady Anlian, she was limp, her eyes wide open in a stare of permanent shock. The court chroniclers claimed she had reached enlightenment, and the emperor ordered her buried in the Garden of Mirrors so her reflection would live forever. But the mirrors in the palace began to crack. Servants whispered that late at night, beneath the floorboards, they could still hear the rhythmic creak, creak, creak of wood that refused to die. The palace called it superstition. The people whispered it was justice. The emperor, blinded by his own propaganda, decided to expand the horror. He planned the Infinite Rotation Project, intending to install these devices in monasteries across the land. One minister, a brave scholar named Li Tuo, dared to speak the truth. "Your Majesty confuses enlightenment with control. Pain does not cleanse, it consumes." For his honesty, Li Tuo was beheaded, his head displayed at the gates. The project moved forward. Over 5 years, 47 women entered the chamber. Only 2 returned, both blind, both mute, both broken saints of a twisted religion. But you cannot build a machine of death without eventually feeding yourself to it. As the emperor's mind decayed into ritual and paranoia, the chamber began to change. It stopped being a tool and started becoming a predator. It began quietly, as all collapses do. Attendants started vanishing. Monks reported seeing their own reflections blinking back at them in the dark mirrors. And then, the impossible happened. The water clock beneath the floor began turning on its own. No one wound it. No one filled the basin. Yet, every night the sound returned. Drip. Turn. Drip. Turn. The rhythm rose through the floorboards like a heartbeat from hell, driving the emperor deeper into madness. He claimed the empire's chaos was proof that the people hadn't learned stillness, and he ordered the chamber reopened for one final cursed session. The victim was Min, a girl of barely 20, condemned for the crime of mercy. She had tended to the sick during a plague without permission. She was bound, bathed in rosewater, and lowered into the dark. But as the chair began its slow, deliberate rotation, the rhythm faltered. The pivot seized, the gears screamed. The chair stopped mid-turn with a violent shudder that shook the foundation. In the panic, the emperor rushed from behind his mirror, shouting for the mechanism to continue, desperate to maintain his illusion of control. He stepped into the circle, and that was when the machine woke up. A monk, trembling with fear, struck the jammed gear with his iron staff. The axis cracked. The water reservoir burst, extinguishing every lamp in the room and plunging them into total, suffocating darkness. In that sudden void, a scream tore through the air, but it wasn't Min's. It was the emperor's. It was a raw, primal shriek of someone realizing that they are no longer the master. When the attendants finally relit the lamps, the mirror was shattered, and the emperor was gone. Only his white robes remained, soaked in oil, draped over the empty chair that was now swaying slowly, rhythmically, even though no one was touching it. The palace went silent. They sealed the doors, they barred the gates. But the rumor spread like wildfire. The spirits of the women had taken him. They said every drop of water in the clock carried a name, and the machine had finally claimed its creator. The regent declared the emperor had transcended, but everyone knew the truth. The silence he craved had finally devoured him. The chamber was buried, not out of guilt, but out of fear. They wanted to trap whatever was down there. But you cannot bury a smell. Centuries later, after the dynasty had fallen and the palace was nothing but ruins, a chronicler named Shu Han dug his way into the sealed underbelly. He spent 3 nights clearing the rubble, and when he finally broke through, the air that rushed out wasn't stale. It was sweet. Thick, cloying jasmine. The chamber was empty, yet the air moved as if stirred by invisible hands. In the center lay a single blackened wooden chair, half rotted but upright, and it was turning. Slowly, endlessly. Shuhan's journal, found later after he drowned under mysterious circumstances, contained a final, terrifying entry. I sat upon the chair only for a moment. The motion was gentle, yet I felt her breath in my ear. A woman's voice whispered, "Now you understand." The artifact was cursed. The republic that followed outlawed its memory, but the ideology of the chamber, that pain is a form of discipline, survived like a virus, infecting schools and prisons for generations. Modern archaeologists have found the pivots and the silk strands fused into the floor, proving this wasn't a myth. One researcher noted that even in the sealed evidence boxes, the faint, sickly scent of jasmine persists, a chemical echo of a horror that refuses to fade. The Emperor is gone, but his logic remains. The Chamber of Reflection is a warning from history. When cruelty learns to speak softly, when it perfumes itself with sanctity and calls obedience peace, it becomes immortal. We still see it today, in systems that demand total compliance, in leaders who sell serenity while tightening the screws. The chair is still turning. We just call it by different names now. Listen closely to the silence in the room, right now. Can you hear it? That faint rhythm beneath the noise of modern life? Drip. Turn. Drip. Turn. It's the sound of power feeding on conscience. The ghosts of the women who knelt in the dark are trying to tell us something. The machine only works as long as we agree to close our eyes. If this story of beauty twisted into madness unsettled you, then you need to see what else we've dug up. Subscribe to Crimson Archive. We don't just tell history, we unearth the things they tried to bury. Can you smell the jasmine? That means you're already part of the story.